A fundraiser brought in more than $60,000 for a Utah father who had gotten stranded on a mountainside with his 3 young children during a bad storm. But that GoFundMe page is now gone, and that dad is facing child torture charges after investigators allege they discovered he intentionally put his children in harm's way on a dangerous hike, likely traumatizing them for the rest of their lives.
This hike was a hard hike. This is not an easy hike. This is a one that even as trained professionals, they suffered injury trying to respond to it.
And you will not believe the horror these kids went through. The disturbing details are all laid out in a brand new indictment, and we are taking you through it all right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, I got to talk about this real quick because it affects millions of Americans. Open enrollment is happening again, where you compare the exploitative premiums and the fine print of health insurance. It is chaos. It really is. Well, here's the good news. Crowd Health is different, okay? Because its members fund each other's bills directly. That's right. If something big happens, you pay the first $500 and the crowd funds the rest. They have a track record of handling major events, including bills over $1 million, giving you that confidence that you need. Plus, you get access to low-cost prescriptions, testing, high-quality doctors, and with the ACA subsidies possibly expiring, premiums are going to skyrocket. And so far, members have saved over $40 million. So this open enrollment, take your power back. Join Crowd Health to get started today for $99 for your first 3 months using code SIDEBAR at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health, it's not insurance. You can opt out, but this is how we win. Joincrowdhealth.com. Are we going to freeze to death, Daddy? That's what a little girl can be heard asking her father in a video recovered from his phone after he allegedly took his 3 young children on an extremely difficult hike up the side of a mountain before eventually abandoning them in the freezing rain, hail, and snow. This is a new set of allegations that we need to talk about. When Micah Smith and his 3 children went hiking in the Broads Fork Trail area in Utah in October, it seemed like a wholesome family outing. The 31-year-old apparently wanting to show his children the stunning views of Big Cottonwood Canyon outside Salt Lake City. But the excursion quickly turned into the hike from hell, and Smith's children ended up stranded on the mountain trail, and now he is facing criminal charges. Let me take you back to October 11th. Smith reportedly set off for the hiking trail with his 2 sons, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and his 8-year-old daughter. Just remember those ages, 2, 4, 8. When they were later reported missing, the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office dispatched its search and rescue teams to find them. They searched the area from above in helicopters, eventually locating the family. And according to a police affidavit, search and rescue team members say the children, at least 2 of them, were close to dying because of those conditions, were in a spot so difficult to get to that rescuers almost couldn't reach them. And that location's important. That location's important when we talk about criminal liability here. Not the trail, but off the trail. That's the allegation. Now, because of his alleged actions, deputies arrested Smith on 3 counts of child torture and 3 counts of aggravated child abuse. So 1 charge each for each of his 3 children. Salt Lake County District Attorney Sam Gill spoke about Smith's arrest on November 26th.
From the evidence that was also gathered from the investigation, they found out that this was something the children were afraid to do as the storms came in, that the defendant pressed them on into changing conditions, whereby exposing them to the potential harm, which was the physical basis of the charges that occurred. The other part that was really critical to us was not only that the children were afraid, but as was indicated by the older child, that she had to try to do CPR to try to save her brother, and to also to continue to go through that experience where she communicated fear and concern, and they were told to march on. So based on the totality of those circumstances, we had filed the charges that we did, which resulted in 6 felony counts being filed. And again, let me underscore that these are allegations only, and there's a presumption of innocence that applies here.
And then you have this indictment that was filed by the district attorney for Salt Lake County that lays out the shocking details of what these 3 young children allegedly went through on that hike, what Smith himself apparently told deputies when they questioned him, and how his own cell phone activity helped further the investigation, which we need to talk about. And the court paperwork offers a scathing rebuke of Smith and his alleged actions. Quote, What seemed like an innocent hike with his 3 children quickly turned into a nightmare when the defendant chose to summit a mountain over the safety of the kids. The defendant, who was supposed to be the protector of his children, was ill-prepared and extremely selfish. So to talk about the details from this indictment, I want to welcome back on Utah criminal defense attorney Skye Lazaro. Skye, thank you so much for coming on. Now, before we even get into what happened to these children, my understanding is you know this trail, right? Like, you know this terrain, you know this hike. I'm not from there. For people who don't know, what is this like? How, steep is it? How dangerous is it? How tough is it? Particularly, not only for adults, you're talking little kids here.
Yeah, we're talking about a 2 and a 4-year-old, and where this trail is located is actually up where Brighton Ski Resort is, for people who ski or have been to Utah to ski. So we're talking about, essentially going up the Wasatch Front. And at the top of that is where Ski Mountain is. So this is really rocky terrain. It's very steep in places. There are some hikes that are a little bit more kid-friendly or friendlier for people who don't have hiking experience, but some of these take very experienced hikers to hike.
Yeah, so when you heard that a father allegedly took his young children up there, was your first impression, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. You don't really do that. You mentioned like there's some trails where you can bring children, but at first glance, does that strike you as strange and not normal?
This would not be one of them. Sometimes you'll see people with kids in backpacks, but you don't generally see children hiking these types of trails, especially that trail.
Generally speaking, how are child torture, child abuse cases, how are they prosecuted? How are they defended? How are they different from other criminal cases?
We've seen a number of child abuse cases and some that have gotten some national attention, thinking of Ruby Franke and cases like that. There's also been a change to our child abuse laws because of those types of cases, for cases where it's been prolonged abuse over a period of time, and they've gotten much more severe about those cases. Usually when we look at child abuse or neglect cases, it is either physical beatings or withholding food, things like that teachers maybe have noticed and turned people in for. This is probably one of the few cases where I've seen it being charged in a case like this where, they were out on a hike. Was it a good decision? No. Should you have taken a child up there? But I haven't seen a child abuse case charged in a case similar to this.
I want to dig into this indictment and get a better sense of this. Now, to be clear, Smith is innocent until proven guilty, but in my opinion, it contains arguably really damning and disturbing details. So as we go through this, I'm going to warn everybody, the children who aren't identified by name, they all have nearly the same initials here. And this is incredibly disturbing details, okay? But we have EAS, who is apparently an 8-year-old girl. EZS is the 4-year-old boy, and ES is the 2-year-old little brother. Now, the children's mother and Smith's wife identified in documents as SS was not on the hike, so it was just the father, okay? Now, the trail itself is really difficult. We talked about this. Trail guide blogs and websites, they have described the trail as challenging, consistently uphill, with the U.S. Forest Service saying it has extensive rock faces and rugged terrain and climbs steeply to an overlook. The district attorney said at one point that Smith and his children weren't even on the trail anymore. They were climbing through this thick brush and vegetation. Take a listen.
Certainly, the evidence showed that this was, first of all, a hike. This is not recommended for children. It is not a hike that is not recommended for inexperienced people going on. This is a hike that led to at a certain point, there are no more trails. And as we said, that one of the child talks about, and we had evidence that was presented at screening, that they were going over rocks that were slipping. They were having to grab onto vegetation as they were trying to hike, as they were further going up. So the hike itself is not an easy one. And as we stated in our probable cause statement, that experienced hikers from search and rescue themselves were injured in the process of trying to do it. They talked about how the ground was shifting, how they had to grab onto different vegetation. And so this was, on its inception, not an easy hike that you would take a child upon.
Now, when the father and children were reported as overdue hikers, the search and rescue teams, they set on the ground and in the air. And according to the indictment, it reads, search and rescue team members encountered Smith on the trail and noted that Smith was behaving oddly and did not appear to be concerned about the children. Smith also told SAR team members that one of his children was dead. So it's incredibly jarring information to apparently be hearing as you're just starting your search for missing children. Thankfully, it wasn't true. The indictment continues. Members of the SAR team, Deputy Franchow and Trooper Haney, deployed via helicopter and located EAS standing alongside a boulder with a few sticks stacked against it and were hoisted to their location. They noted that the children were not wearing much clothing, stating that ES was under EZS and EZS was mostly exposed, unconscious, and appeared lifeless. Now, those deputies reported they couldn't even find a pulse on EZS. Again, this 4-year-old, so he was taken to the hospital first. As far as we know, he's still there now. The details provided about his condition, they are just absolutely heartbreaking. According to first responders, they had to do CPR on EZS for 25 minutes to keep him alive. His body temperature was a shocking 62.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The indictment states that this 4-year-old suffered a stroke and had to have a portion of his skull removed and a drain put in. It is awful. It is awful. Now, Skye, those injuries suffered by just one of those children, allegedly because of his own father's careless behavior. Let me start there. Is this a case, and we'll get into more details, where you could say a father was trying to do the right thing, take them out on an excursion, have them have a great experience, and the weather was unforeseeable. There was, this was just a tragic consequence. It's not bad parenting. It's not, maybe it's bad parenting, but it's not child torture. It's not child abuse. Or when you look at those injuries and you think about the father taking him to that location, he's we say it in the law, strict liability, right? There's no excuse. There's nothing. If these injuries are sustained, you're guilty. Not exactly the case, right? But talk to me about this idea of, is lapse in parenting, a lapse in judgment, is that a defense here? Or you look at these injuries, there's no excuse?
I think these injuries are pretty bad. I think there's always cases across the country where, like you said, people get caught up in situations that were unforeseeable. The weather changed, people get lost in the woods, people get lost on hikes, and it's an accident. And I think this, even if you look at it under like a reckless mens rea, giving this guy the benefit of every doubt that he didn't mean for any of this to happen, going out on a trail like this, what happened is not an unforeseen circumstance. This wasn't like the weather turned and we got lost. He had no business being on that trail with these children. Now, in defending that case, maybe he's not from, is he from Utah? Does he know? The problem is yes, in this case. And so when you look at these injuries, these are very severe injuries. And it's not as if somebody fell accidentally. I mean, there's defenses to these cases, right? Where somebody didn't mean for something to happen, or you get lost, or you get stuck, or a kid falls down. Kids do get hurt, and it's not child abuse all the time. I think this case is going to be a little bit harder to defend. And I honestly think because we have such an outdoor community and it's so widely regarded in Utah, I'm not sure the district attorney's office would charge a case that they didn't think there was at least some basis for.
Right. Well, those alleged statements that he made, how problematic are those? I mean, because I'm wondering what a defense could be. Maybe he was hallucinating from his exposure to the elements, didn't realize what he was saying. They're not saying that yet, but I'm just wondering because to say you're acting weird when law enforcement's trying to find out what happened to your kids and then saying, you think they're dead, that's not good. That's not good for what you're charged with.
No, it's not. It actually, can cut the other way, and maybe it was intentional. If maybe he
Well, I
took
was going
them
to
out
ask
there.
you, I mean,
Maybe he got them lost. I
do you,
think
do you think there could be upgraded charges, manslaughter, murder? I mean, attempted murder?
I don't think they're going to upgrade the charges unless new information comes to light to support those. I think if they thought they had those, they would have probably charged them early on. Now, that doesn't mean as the investigation unfolds and maybe they don't learn more I know we have some text messages, but if they get more into his phone and see some stuff in the past where, could this have been an unfortunate circumstance where he took the kids up there and was going to leave them? I don't know. Let's hope not, right? Let's hope this was at best just a really bad decision. And maybe, looking at it from the defense side, sure, those statements could have been he was dehydrated, he had been exposed to the elements, he'd been out there as well. And so he wasn't in his right frame of mind at the time he was speaking. I think defenses are tough until you can look at everything and kind of get your mind wrapped around what's out there.
So let me get into why that's going to be really difficult for him. So EAS, this 8-year-old girl, allegedly provided a ton of information to authorities about what had happened over the last 24 hours or so. I'm going to read from the indictment. Quote, EAS reported that on the day of the hike, they got snacks. She said Smith told her it was going to be a 9-mile hike and a 9-hour hike, but wasn't sure which. EAS described that she was tired at the beginning of the hike and ate the snacks they were supposed to save. EAS said they climbed about 2 miles from the top and they had to climb rocks and grab onto bushes. EAS said near the top the clouds started to come in, and she suggested to Smith that they should go, but he shook his head no and said, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing." EAS said she again expressed to Smith that they should really go and that she was getting scared. EAS said Smith told her, "You shall not pass." And then the storm came in really quickly and described that it was snowing, hailing, and raining. She said she was worried about not living, but Smith told her that they were okay. EAS described that it was a really hard night and she was freezing cold. She described that she had to keep EZS warm and Smith had to keep ES warm. EAS described that their teeth were chattering and their clothes were wet. Now, Skye, it's one thing to say, how do you interview a child victim? How do investigators or interviewers determine which parts of the story are credible? Look at the injuries. I mean, it seems to me that this account, which is instrumental in these charges and potentially going to be instrumental if this child has to testify at a trial against their father, they're backed up by the injuries, no?
I would say yes. And listening to that story, it doesn't sound like she's embellishing a lot. I mean, it sounds pretty matter of fact in terms of what it's like up there. Having been on that trail, that is a very difficult trail. And for someone who hikes a lot and is in good shape, it's difficult and it's hard. Those kids really had no business being up there. The other thing is why would you just not turn around when your kids are tired? I mean, there's a lot of things here. And then spending overnight up there, it's cold, and you get up high, it's really cold and there's not a lot of shelter up there.
And saying, tough parenting, I wanted them to experience this. That's not going to work as defense. I mean, is she going to have to testify against her father in open court if this goes to trial, or there's some mechanism in place where you don't have to have a minor victim testify against their father?
She would have to testify at trial. Now, there'll be a CJC interview that was done, which is probably what they're quoting from, that's done, by people who are trained to interview children. At a preliminary hearing phase, they can use that CJC interview so that she wouldn't have to testify. But most likely, if this case ends up at trial, she would have to take the stand. Now, let's hope that there's a way to either resolve this or something else that doesn't require that, because nobody wants to put a 10-year-old on the stand to testify against her own father.
No. Now, investigators, they also spoke with Smith himself, okay? And at this point, the deputies, they were just trying to figure out what had happened. They weren't necessarily looking at Smith as a suspect in a criminal case yet. I mean, they're trying to understand, was this just a tragedy? What happened here? Well, according to Smith, on the morning of October 11th, he decided to take the kids on a hike, and they left their home at around 9 a.m. They stopped at a store to get new shoes and socks to hike in, and they got to the trailhead at around 10 a.m. According to the indictment, quote, Smith stated they made really good time up the trail and were near the summit at around 6 p.m. Let's pause for a second and let that sink in. So 8 hours on a trail rated as difficult with a 2-year-old, 4-year-old, and 8-year-old. The affidavit continues. Smith said around this time the weather turned to mist, fog, rain, and hail. Smith said they attempted to hike back down the trail and made it approximately 600 feet down before he decided they should find shelter and estimated it was 8 p.m. Smith admitted he was unfamiliar with the trail. He also admitted that he did not check the trail reports or the weather prior to heading out for the hike. Skye, if that's true, how does that factor into this?
One, it's dark in Utah at that time. I don't know why you're still going uphill when you know you have to come back down in the dark is probably the first problem. The other thing, not checking weather reports, I think is reckless. I also think a lot of people probably do that, where they head up a trail and maybe haven't looked and seen what the weather. We see that in southern Utah all the time, where people get caught in slot canyons with, torrential rain. So that to me is probably reckless. I think, if it had just been that, maybe he doesn't get charged. But all these other things that are factored into it that are a little, bring it to a little bit more than just bad decisions.
So in other words, reckless is not the standard when we're talking about torture and aggravated child abuse. There needs to be an intent element there?
It needs to be intentionally and knowingly.
Okay, so let's continue. So at this point, according to what Smith apparently told investigators, he tries to make a makeshift shelter under a rocky overhang. He claimed he put needles on the ground, used his shirt to make a wall. He then allegedly told the kids to take off their wet clothes, huddle together for warmth. Now, things were going from bad to worse as the evidence of just how badly his children were suffering started to show. The probable cause statement says that Smith claimed ES, the 2-year-old, fell and hit his head and appeared dazed. And EZS was in a bad way. Smith said EZS was very cold, had difficulty breathing during the night. He told the deputies he performed CPR on EZS multiple times. And remember, this is the 4-year-old, the one who was life-flighted in very critical condition. And this next part of the indictment is just stunning. Quote, Smith reported he also taught EAS how to do CPR and gave her instructions to do CPR on EZS while he was gone. And Smith said that he then left the 3 children and went down the mountain. Now, Skye, if he goes on the stand, okay, and he testifies to all this, okay, and says, look, I'm trying to protect my children, I'm trying to save my children, left to try to find help, is that sufficient?
That's a tough call, right? Do you leave to one? There's very few places up there you don't have cell service, so I'm gonna throw that out there.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean,
that's fair.
Maybe he did it where he was. That's fine. But a lot of those hikes, your phone will work pretty well.
So the leaving is really like what separates this case from a sheer tragedy accident. And I'll get into more of the cell phone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the leaving is hard. I think, if you've been in an emergency situation out in the wilderness, there is always the, do I try to get this person, can I safely try to get this person out of here? Or is it better, to leave them where they are because of their injuries and get help as quickly as I can? I think that's always the dilemma. Anybody in a situation where something bad happens that's not intentional, that's not criminal, that's just an accident, right? That's always the question. But I don't know that leaving 3 kids behind on that trail where you can probably safely try to get them out is a very good idea. Especially, I mean, we're talking about the 10-year-old is a problem. The 4-year-old's a problem, but we're also talking about, I believe, wasn't one of them 2?
Yeah. We're talking about
you're leaving a 2-year-old unsupervised.
Yeah.
With a 4-year-old who's injured and a 10-year-old who's trying to do CPR. I mean, there's some big problems with this case, I think.
Yeah, and by the way, so during interviews after that, Smith was Mirandized, but apparently stuck to pretty much the same version of the story. He reportedly confirmed that after ES fell and hit his head, he stopped breathing multiple times during the night. Smith said he believes he did CPR on EZS for a large portion of the night, about every 5 minutes. So the question is, why didn't he turn back and head for safety as soon as there was an indication of the coming storm? Well, here's what Smith reportedly told investigators, quote, Smith admitted that he considered turning around to the weather when they were close to the peak, but he wanted to finish the hike before turning around. Smith also said that the kids asked to go home, but he thought they would be okay and continued hiking. Smith said that EZS, EAS, and ES complained about the hike through most of the hike, and he managed the complaints by taking breaks, giving encouragement, and playing games with them. Smith said they watched the weather come in, and he sent photos to his wife, SS, who suggested they start hiking down the mountain. However, Smith reported that he was comfortable hiking in the dark without a light. Quote, law enforcement noted that the hike Smith took, EZS, EAS, and ES on, was nearly 9 miles, rated hard, not recommended for beginner hikers or children. They also noted that the weather on the date of the hike showed rain and thunderstorms, strong winds, below normal temperatures, and snow in the mountains. And by the way, investigators would later discover evidence on Smith's phone that corroborated what his daughter had told them. The first part of that evidence was videos that he recorded during the hike. So the probable cause statement reads, quote, in one of the videos, EAS expressed that the clouds were moving in fast and asked Smith, are we going to freeze to death, Daddy? Smith responded that they were, quote, almost to the top. In another video, Smith told the children that the path they would take was not the normal one and that they were taking the path less traveled, then explained that the path will be hard and is not easy. In multiple videos, EZS and EAS are observed hiking with no trail, scaling the sides of the cliff, and trying to make it through the bushes. The children are observed struggling, complaining, and cold. Skye, I listen to this evidence and I think to myself, if this comes in, you got to work on a plea deal if you're a defense attorney, because I don't know how you fight back against something like this.
I agree with you. I mean, here's the thing, as we've talked about, these charging documents are always the greatest hits that the state has, right? They're not going to put exculpatory evidence in them. They're going to put, the evidence they have that support the charges or they believe supports the charges. Even that being said, I think if this video evidence comes in, which it will, I mean, I can't think of a way to keep it out as long as they can authenticate it, that it came from his phone at the time he was on the hike, along with the injuries for the children, which are coming in, and any testimony from the kids, which is coming in. Whoever he hires or whoever's defending him, unless there's some really good exculpatory evidence out there, and I can't really think of anything that would override. I know the weather's getting bad. I took my kids on a 9-mile hike that they shouldn't have been on to begin with, and then I took them off the trail. And then instead of carrying them out when they got hurt, I left them. And you got problems. I think you better start talking about what's the best we can do in this so that he can see his kids again someday.
Now, the other critical piece of evidence apparently found on Smith's phone were text messages between him and his wife. According to the filing, quote, during the hike, Smith sent text messages to SS where they discussed the children. SS asked if the children were safe, and he responded with a photo at 5:17 p.m. In the photo, dark clouds and rain are visible in the distance. At 5:18 p.m., Smith responded, yes, EZS is exhausted. We're almost to the very top, but everyone is starting to fail and it's starting to rain. I'm getting tired of carrying ES. It's tough with 3 children and no second parent. They engage in a text argument, and at 5:26 p.m., SS told Smith, you better leave, it's going to get dark. At 6:02 p.m., Smith responded, I know. It's stressing me out or deep in the clouds. SS responded at 6:04 p.m., child endangerment, not cool. At 6:11 p.m., Smith sent SS a photo that showed EAS and EZS in the clouds surrounded by rocks and snow. EZS appears visibly cold. SS responded at 6:11 p.m., get them home. At 6:41 p.m., she sent a message that said, well, okay, Skye, thoughts?
Like I said, your phone works up there. Why would you not call for help? At some point, and the other question is maybe she should have. I know she's not charged in this case, but we've seen cases where the other parent maybe gets charged, with something lesser for not interfering or calling law enforcement or reporting it or something else. But all that aside, the fact that when that child got hurt, that he didn't send an emergency message or a text message to her that says, send help to my location, I think it's just one more bad fact for him. And the fact that she's telling him to turn around and come home, and he is, I don't want to use the word obsessed, but super focused on getting to the top. For what reason? Who knows? I mean, I get wanting to finish a hike, but you got little kids with you. You should have gone half a mile up that trail and turned around and come back.
Yeah, and as far as the wife, it might be difficult for a significant other, a wife, a husband, to really accept that, wait, is he purposely endangering the children? I mean, if I'm going to trust if everything's okay, I mean, that could be the case, but I'll tell you this much, okay? According to Salt Lake County investigators, this isn't the first time that Smith had interactions with police. His indictment states, quote, approximately 1 month before this incident, the defendant expressed suicidal ideations and was located by the Cottonwood Heights Police Department attempting to locate a mountain. He reported to the officer that he was going through a really hard time and was going to hike to the top of a mountain. The defendant had 2 firearms and an axe in his vehicle when he was contacted by the police. However, he denied that he was going to kill himself. Now, Skye, how does that factor into this? Do you think, A, this is something that would actually come into evidence at the trial, and B, go back to this other concept that we have, if we're talking about, again, I don't want to put blame on anybody, right? But thinking about what had just happened to him and going up to a mountain with the children, I don't know what the conversation was beforehand, but I guess the point is for purposes of the legal discussion, is this relevant to the case at hand? Does this come in to his case?
It could. I mean, I can foresee a situation where that evidence would come in, especially if he's going to take the stand and testify and say, everything was fine. I don't have any problems. They were safe. We were just going to get to the top and come back, and then it didn't go right. I can see the prosecutors wanting to use this. Now, it's not really 404B bad acts. But I can see it going to a state of mind or something along those lines, or should he have had the children? What was he doing? So I think in a world where he testifies that this evidence would come in, especially, if they ask him, have you ever had any problems? And he says no, or did you have any mental health issues about, getting to the top of this mountain? It's also a little bit in line with the way, maybe to explain the way he was acting when he came down. Maybe he does have some mental health issues that will factor into this case, probably both for the prosecution and the defense. I could foresee the defense trying to use something along those lines to try to get a better plea deal and say, look, he was going through a mental health episode. This wasn't intentionally and knowingly. He wasn't trying to injure the children. Should he have had them up there? No, but he needs help. So I could see this. I could see them trying to use this, both sides.
That's a good point. I should mention there's another bizarre detail too. So Smith is also accused of going to see his 4-year-old son at the hospital and messing with the equipment that's helping to keep him alive. Yeah, the indictment says, on November 10th, 2025, the defendant was trespassed from Primary Children's Hospital for interfering with EZS's care and tampering with equipment. He was arrested for domestic violence in connection with that alleged stunt. Skye, I don't even know what to make of that, but I imagine that has more of a chance of coming into this case than maybe what he was up to before the hike.
The state's going to show is that, or going to try to show, is that, he created this situation where the children were injured, and that's how you get to child abuse. Yeah. And so what he did after, I think, becomes relevant as to, what his, you don't have to prove motive, but what his state of mind was, or what he was thinking when he went up that trail. If I'm the defense, I'm really hoping at this point that there is some sort of mental health problem that you can lean on a little bit to explain this type of behavior, because otherwise it really looks like you're trying to intentionally harm or kill your children.
So when news of the family's rescue first made headlines back in October, there was a groundswell of support for Smith, okay? That was before the allegations of what happened on the mountain were made public. And according to the Salt Lake Tribune, there was a GoFundMe that was started by a man identifying himself as Smith's brother, raised more than $60,000 for the family before it was taken down. The Tribune says that the GoFundMe page had stated that Smith, quote, bravely sacrificed himself for his children. Reportedly wrote, Micah is a good dad who loves his kids and loves taking them on adventures. Unfortunately, tragedy struck this time around. Now, it's unclear what happened to the money raised now that the page has been taken down, but clearly there has been a change in the narrative and understanding about what may have happened to these kids. The online court docket doesn't show when Smith will be in court next, but for now, he is being held, our understanding, without bail at the Salt Lake County Jail, and at last check, at least 2 of his 3 children remain hospitalized. We are sending our best wishes and well wishes to them and a speedy recovery. My gosh, this is awful. Skye Lazaro, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.